Hi, I'm Nick Matthews, and I was a cinematographer on Saw X. There were so many parts of my childhood that became a part of my journey to horror and my journey specifically to Saw X. I grew up in a very religious, fundamentalist Christian home. You know, growing up in the South and growing up in the American South, so much of that part of the world is steeped in violence, steeped in the macabre. There's a primalness to the mythology of the Bible. There's a primalness and a violence to that sort of storytelling. And it sort of harkens back to the stories that cultures have been telling all throughout history, which is who are we as people, what are we as people, and how did we get here? And so I grew up reading stuff like Kafka, stuff like Hemingway, stuff like Hawthorne and Flannery O'Connor and this sort of Southern Gothic. And I was always fascinated by fringe sort of culture and ideology, and I grew up in something that looked at the world just a little bit differently. And eventually I fell in love with movies and storytelling, and that kind of happened in high school. I was writing my first novel and I was playing around with short stories, and then I came across, I think it was really for me, Lord of the Rings and all these sort of behind the scenes and that kind of era of filmmaking. There was a lot of box sets where they were showing how movies are made, and it really captured my interest. And so that kind of started me thinking about filmmaking and who's behind this and who's a part of this process. And eventually in college, when I started to actually have a few more people involved in the process, I realized what I actually loved was cinematography. I loved that I could take a camera into a space and I could use lights and I could use lenses, and the way that I framed something and shot something and captured it would dictate how the audience experienced it. For me, like my first interaction with Saw was in high school. I remember it coming out and there was so much buzz about this underground movie that was, you know, very violent and a bit of a bad boy movie, and it was very unknown and very exciting. And I had to press and press in order to get my religious father to let me rent the movie from Blockbuster, and finally he caved. He's like, don't tell anyone from church you saw it. The moment I finished that movie, I told people from church that I saw it. I loved it, and I was so taken by what a thriller it was. I was so taken by the twists and the turns and this unique visual style that it really felt like I hadn't seen before. And I was also very much taken by the themes of the world. You know, it is something with a very entrenched morality. It's something that's playing with those big ideas. And so that was sort of my initial, entry point. Eventually, I decided about 10 years ago, I'm gonna move to Los Angeles. I know I'll regret it the rest of my life if I don't give myself the shot of making movies. I sold everything I owned, packed up a tiny compact car, and moved out here with my dog at the time and my wife. And so I ended up applying to jobs on Mandy and Craigslist and sort of shooting whatever like little random rap video I could and little short film that I could. But eventually I realized what didn't touch my soul and what didn't work for me and what wasn't interesting to me. And as I said no to things and as I said yes to other things, doors started to open. I ended up getting this script sent to me through my representatives. They called me and they're like, I think you'll be really excited. We've got the next Saw movie and I think you might want to read it. And I was like, yes. I don't know if I can swear, probably not. I was like, amazing. When I read the script, I thought, this is the best script of this franchise. 5 hours later, I interviewed with Kevin Groot, the director, and we just connected about so much of what we thought was interesting in Saw. We loved the darkness of the movie. We loved the giallo color palette. We love that there's grime and there's grit, and it sort of feels like you want a tetanus shot after you watch it. So we were, doing everything we could to try to get back to that. And I felt that what we were gonna be able to do with this film was gonna be different than any other Saw film. I knew that the way that I would like this movie was gonna be unique, that it was going to bring something new to the table. So the early Saw films were all shot on 35mm, and I wanted desperately for us to find a way to hark back to that look. And I was looking for a camera system and lens package and filtration package that would take the edge off of digital and also make it feel very 35mm, feel very filmic, and be something that would take the audience right into the Saw world. It just became clear to us there's only one camera that we can use. It's a Sony VENICE. And there's only one lens that we can use, and it's the Cooke Panchro Classic. We loved the way that the high ASAs on the Venice looked. So filmic, it's very 35mm. The texture and the grain, it doesn't feel like digital noise. There's no fixed pattern. It's very beautiful and organic. We knew that we could get into these very dark environments and we could bake that grain in just to start. And frankly, it's a very clean camera, even at high ASAs. We ended up having to add grain in post to continue to mess it up and to continue to make it more textural because the camera is still that beautifully clean at high ASAs. We were putting it through a lot of challenging environments. There's blood flying everywhere, there's rain, there's sun. It's going through all these different environments. The camera withstood every single thing that we threw it at. And one of the things I love about the camera is it has an incredibly fast shutter rate. It's something that we were able to use guns firing blanks. And I'm so used to using blanks and seeing split frames. This camera didn't have a single split frame. We were able to use live fire with blanks and no split frames. One of the things that was really exciting about shooting Saw X was we wanted to bring the Giallo color palettes into this movie. So there's really big expressive colors. Scenes are arsenical green, they're ochre yellow, there's this blue fluorescent. And so there's primary, secondary, and tertiary colors all at play that tie into Saw 1 and Saw 2. And then I'm using that to sort of create this rotating, constantly shifting look, and we got to play with a lot of different colors. There's, for instance, a nightclub scene where we're shooting an entire scene in almost all red lighting with just little pockets of amber. The Venice was the perfect camera for that environment because I was able to do these big dolly shots across all this talent, and it was still able to pick up all these little details of these influencers and actors and extras that we'd brought in together to create this beautiful nightclub. And I needed a camera that could see with red lighting, which so many cameras fall apart with red. It gets mushy, it gets soft. The Venice was the perfect camera for that environment. Directly tying into that sequence, we cut out into this big night exterior. That's a train yard and there's all sorts of darkness, and I had to put up lights in as many places as I could, but we were fighting time, we're fighting budget, and being able to rely on the high sensitivity of this camera actually meant that we were able to make our night and get through that day. And it wouldn't have been possible without a camera like the Venice. As we were looking at ways to make this Saw film feel very textural, like 35mm, we started looking for lenses that we could pair with a sharp digital sensor to give it that vintage feel. And I couldn't think of a better lens than the Cooke Panchro Classic. This lens is modern housing, modern design, so you're not dealing with all the challenges of vintage lenses. You're not dealing with different sizes and different dimensions and different weights constantly, where every time you put the matte box on, you have to change something. But beyond that, and more importantly to me, is the aesthetic of the lens. I love these lenses. There's a certain softness, there's a way that it renders faces that no other lens gets to. It's incredibly beautiful, it feels vintage, it has a certain special quality to it, and I just can't wait to keep shooting on these lenses. I feel really honored and grateful to have been a part of the Saw legacy and to be able to be a part of creating something that fans can enjoy and love for years and years to come. And I just felt surrounded by such a talented group of people. I had a fantastic first AC that I'd worked with, who was my ACAM first. This first AC named Citlali Vargas, and she brought on just amazing people, and she's one of the best focus pullers in Mexico City. I had a gaffer named Ignacio Sanchez, our production designer, Anthony Stabley. My lighting was really accentuating the work that they were doing. As I look to the future, I'm really hoping to continue making films that have a unique, exciting visual style. I want to do films that have expansive world building that are part of them. And I want to continue to make films that invite you into the emotional landscape of a really fascinating character. I hope to continue to make films that are provocative, that polarize the audience, and excite and scare, and maybe make them squirm a little bit. I just love movies that take you for a ride, and I want to be a part of making that kind of propulsive entertainment.